This 1997 Toyota 4Runner has an extremely firm brake pedal, so I suspect the brake booster is bad. But the proper diagnosis step is to take the wheels off of the truck and depress the brake calipers, because it's usually a stuck slide pin or stuck piston on these old Toyota trucks. So here's a quick little diagnostic hack. Unbolt the brake master cylinder and you're going to push the push rod to the left and to the right. And if you hear the vacuum leaking out of it, it's a bad brake booster. So this one does have a ruptured something in the front where the push rod comes out. And that's why the brake pedal in this truck is extremely firm. So I'm going to be installing this Amazon. It was like 80 bucks. I'll link in the description and I'll let you know if it works, because the one from the parts store costs like $400, which is ridiculous. The charcoal canister has to come out of the truck because the brake booster is so large you're not going to be able to wiggle it out. So it is a really good idea just to do the master cylinder at the same time when you're doing this job, and I'm an idiot and I didn't. I had to go in and do the master cylinder later. So removing the master cylinder would make this substantially easier, but I still think you need to take the charcoal canister out to do the job. Unbolting the master cylinder is pretty simple. You got a couple 12mm bolts. So this truck is a non-ABS and I've never done one on an ABS 4Runner or Tacoma. It may be a little bit different. So these two brake lines are spread out pretty darn far. So I didn't know if this was possible, and it is, but you do have to kind of bend the brake lines to a dangerous level to do this job with the master cylinder installed on the truck. So learn this from me: when you're dealing with a 1997 car, it's okay to use the parts cannon, because I was trying not to use the parts cannon and I'm ending up having to replace all the brake system anyway. Once the master cylinder is unbolted from the brake booster, we're going to move into the inside of the truck, pull the carpet a little bit down, get a 12mm deep wobbly socket, and you're going to unbolt the master cylinder, actually the brake booster, from the firewall. This isn't particularly difficult and it's not particularly fun. So do not forget this step, because I actually went back and had to do this later after the brake booster was stuck. So there is a spring, a pin, and a like cotter pin thing holding the pedal to the brake booster. So do not forget this step. So pay attention closely here. Make sure the pedal is detached from the brake booster before moving into the engine bay. So after like 15 minutes of struggling, here's the technique. We're going to take the brake booster and pull it upward while bending the master cylinder brake lines like you shouldn't. At this point, we need to do a whole bunch of transferring of old parts onto the new brake booster. So this fork thing needs to come off and go onto the new Amazon part. And we're going to transfer over this little gasket, which is pretty important because you do not want road noise going into the cab. To transfer over the inner fork that holds onto the brake pedal, we're going to use a crescent wrench to break the lock nut free, and then hold the fork with some jaws, some pliers, whatever you have. Break that lock nut free. But do not unscrew the fork until you have the height. We need to basically copy everything over from the old stuff onto the new stuff. So we're going to flip it over and work on the other side after the lock nut is tight on the fork side. So this is the important side, the part that goes into the master cylinder. So according to Toyota, we need SST depth tool do-da-D. It's probably an OTC part. There's a couple different ways we can accomplish the correct depth into the master cylinder. It's a little bit daunting. I've never done it without the tool. So this is one way we could do it. We can trace the old push rod and transfer it over onto the other push rod. So this push rod on the Amazon one is like a 7mm and a crescent wrench. It was kind of ghetto. The old Toyota one's like an 8mm and an 8mm, but hey, this part was 80 bucks. So when you watch the next video on the master cylinder install, I have a whole nother procedure that gets it perfectly set without the SST tool, but that's the next video. Double, triple check all your depths are set on your push rod and your fork side, and all the lock nuts are tight. And this is the technique to put it back in the car. We're going to go in reverse and you just kind of angle it down. And then at this point, you got to bend that master cylinder pretty viciously to get it into place. This part is probably the most challenging of them all because we need to line up the 4 pins on the back of the brake booster into the firewall. So hopefully you watched this video first. It's a good idea to take a picture of the brake pedal assembly, like how all the springs went, because I didn't know and I just kind of had to figure it out. So first step is to tighten the 4 12mm bolts on the back of the brake booster, and this is never fun laying on your back inside of a car. But do not forget to reattach the brake pedal to the brake booster through the fork, there's a pin. And then there's like a cotter pin on the back of the pin. But the most challenging part, if you didn't take a picture, there's a spring that goes back and you need to hook that back on so the brake pedal returns to its home position. Reattach that master cylinder to your new brake booster with the 12mm or the 13mm Amazon bolts provided, and this is when I discovered how badly I'd bent those brake lines. So fire it up and see if it's holding vacuum. You will know right away if you have your brakes back. Basically, I do have the brake power back, but here's a vitally important step that you need to do after completing this job. So here's the super important step. You need to find a hill or lift the front of the car up and make sure the car rolls, because if you set the push rod depth wrong on the brake booster, it could lock the brakes up and cause a fire. This was a really interesting job though, okay? So I'm like, yes, everything is good to go. And then I drove like 20 miles and the brakes locked up. So basically I was like, well, what does every brake part in this truck have in common besides the brake booster? That would be the brake master. So I did fix the problem, but you got to watch that video on your screen, because please do not do this job without also installing a brake master cylinder.